this day like today gives us an opportunity. If I'm honest, it's got absolutely nothing to do with armoured warfare at all. It was designed as like a little mobile tug. We often think it looks a bit like a porta potty with tracks underneath it. The idea behind it, the crew, it was used to tow supplies. The Luftwaffe used it to help, used almost like an aircraft tug to drive, to pull out aircraft. In front of it is a much more obvious vehicle for us to be interested in, the Panzer III. And this particular Panzer III was captured in North Africa. We know it was, we've got some dates for it, because occasionally with our vehicles we know a lot of information, sometimes we don't. And this particular Panzer III, it was made in Nuremberg, was railed down to Naples, went over to Benghazi on the Leopard, which was a German ship at the time, and it arrives in Benghazi on the 18th of July 1942. Now we know this factual information because the Germans, being very, very pedantic about writing down the serial number of the vehicles, in the American National Archives they captured the records of the port control officer who ended up writing down absolutely the serial numbers of every German vehicle that turned up in North Africa, so we could pin down when our Panzer III arrived. What we're not so sure about is exactly how it was captured, but we have some photographs in the collection of the vehicle after capture being debombed out in North Africa. It was sent back to the UK with a number of other captured vehicles. Famously later on the Tiger comes to the UK, same reasoning, and what happens there is it's taken to Chertsey, just off the M3, which are now film studios, and that's where they did all the analysis on this captured kit. And in 1951 this Panzer III was handed over to the Tank Museum after it had been used at the School of Tank Technology. There was a lineup of interesting captured vehicles and British vehicles where what they were trying to do is show soldiers this to get that, here's some design features you might find of interest, and certainly in terms of information as well about finding out about the enemy vehicles, which of course is what was all that captured kit in the Second World War. Now I gather again it's Sunday, drove around perfectly yesterday. I gather we've got some problems with Panzer III at the moment, and no doubt they'll be down there burning away trying to rectify it at the last moment, but it's stuttering a bit as well. That Panzer III, a Model L, outsprung L, what happens with the Germans in the 1930s, they have terrible trouble trying to get their tank designs together. They haven't manufactured tanks. Don't forget, the Versailles Peace Treaty stops them manufacturing tanks. They send some engineers out around the world. Some go to Russia, to Kazan, and to help with the Russians design vehicles. Some go to Sweden and help the Swedes design vehicles to learn the art. But back in Germany, there are real problems putting the Panzer I, Panzer II, and then their battle tanks, the Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs together. When they start going into operation, very quickly they realise they're going to have to up-gun them, and this particular Panzer III has got the long-barrelled, high-velocity 50mm gun on. Now, Panzer III sadly not finishing its lap at the moment because of trouble, but another famous German vehicle that many of you will recognise coming on now. This is the famous Tiger, and this vehicle, Tiger 131, was fighting with the 504th Schwer Panzerabteilung Heavy Tank Battalion out in Tunisia, knocks out a couple of British Churchill tanks, but they're firing back at it. One of the rounds you can see glances off the lifting eye on the side of the turret, the damage can still be seen. We know another round hit the loader's hatch and shattered it. The key round, well aimed, as some veteran mentioned to me. I used to say the lucky shot, and then he said no, it was a well aimed shot. Goes under the barrel, grazes it under the mantlet, and jams between the turret and the hull. We've never been able to pin down the exact crew. We've got a photograph of them. We've never been able to get them interviewed. One day, perhaps a full story, whether they were wounded, what happened to them, we're not sure. They abandoned this vehicle, they were supposed to blow it up, and the following day the 48th Royal Tank Regiment had the first captured Tiger in the West. That jammed round is knocked out, the king comes to see it, Churchill calls all on over it, and the student is brought back to the prison for evaluation. And one of the guys that was in the knocked out Churchill that was destroyed by this very tank when he recovered from his wounds, his name was Lieutenant Peter Gudgeon. He sent down to Chertsey, where this Tiger tank had been taken. They opened the hangar door, and he put in charge of writing a report on the very tank that knocked him out in combat. And those reports we have in the archive. They've been published by HMSO. And again, if you're interested in knowing the story about this tank, I can only recommend the book we wrote here at the museum, which is called The Haynes Manual on the Tiger Tank. And it not only tells you about the history of the restoration, the history of how it was captured, but also why we run it and what we do with it, and the other surviving Tigers. So do be careful, because with the Tiger, of course, there's massive amounts of mythology out there, and there's a couple of books, one book purporting to tell the story of this tank, which is utter tosh. So please never buy that book. I don't even want to mention his name. So here's our Tiger 1 going around, painted again in the camouflage of the scheme that was used out in North Africa. Has some vital air filters on the back. They were an air filtration system added to some of the vehicles that were going to North Africa to help filter out the sand and the dust before it got in the engine. We're going to park the tank there in front of the main part of the museum for the moment, because we're very lucky at the moment to be able to do a comparison that few can do, well, no one can do anywhere else in the world. We're very fortunate that with the Dutch Army that's brought their Leopard 2 tank over, the Dutch, lovely example of how people think the tank's not going to be any use anymore. The Dutch got rid of their Leopard tanks not so long ago, realised their mistake, and they're now leasing more Leopard tanks and fighting and training rather with the German army at the moment. This particular Leopard 2 was kept by the historic collection in the Dutch military, and they use it to take to shows. This is the Leopard 2A4 version. Now earlier in the day we saw the early Leopard 1 tank. I think you'll read this contrast with the Tiger, because after World War II, the Bundeswehr was reformed in the mid-1960s. They started a program to build new tanks again. And what happens is the Leopards go in a different direction to the Tiger. They go for speed, mobility, good firepower. You saw with Leopard 1 that was running around earlier. This Leopard 2 has the powerful 120 gun on it, but it's 120mm gun, but it's also got extra armour. So they've managed to keep up the mobility of the vehicle very, very effectively, but keep the protection levels going north, in other words, getting more and more protection to match the other modern main battle tanks that were in service at the time. So it's been a tremendously effective vehicle in service. We're very grateful to the Dutch Army to bring this over, and we're going to be able to park it up in a moment so you can see the contrast, a bit of a photo opportunity between a successor tank to the Tiger 1. Really charming experience, by the way, after World War II. We decided we never wanted to go to war again with a tank that has less armour protection and less firepower than the enemy. And that's why we went to big tanks like the Chiefs we saw earlier on today. Not so good on mobility, but very strong on firepower, very strong on the armour protection. Now we're going to be parking up that Leopard in front of the Tiger, as I mentioned, and that gives a photo opportunity whilst we, for a couple of moments, and then we're going to be setting up for the battle. But we've also, just so you know, we've got an aeroplane will be coming over as well, so you're going to have a wonderful air display, again with a bit of a historic airframe coming over. So once we park up here, that brings our historic bit of armour to an end. And we'll be waiting then to go on with our